Okay, so I'm going to talk a bit more about this image behind me, which hopefully most of you are familiar with, but I thought, I just think it's such a fantastic image that it's, I love to talk about it, and I think it just introduces so many key teachings of the Buddha that I think it's a really useful image. So I introduced the image by actually talking about the theme for the year. So this theme, this year, we're focusing on this phrase, be the revolution, which personally I get very excited by. I know not everybody does, but I think it's a great phrase. So what might that mean? I think it suggests that to be aware, to wake up into our experience, to wake up into the whole texture of our being is a revolutionary act. So this is why I'm so interested in this image, because it really leads us into our being. It leads us in, it encourages us to really engage with our experience, and this image particularly through our imagination. So imagining our life more as a story or an image rather than considering it to be based on kind of hard, crisp, defined objects and realities. Actually, we are living through and in our imagination the whole of the time. And to really let that in as a truth, I think is very important to really start to practice the Dharma, actually, to recognize that we are really primarily working to change our narrative, change our storylines. So I really like the fact that we're working directly with this image, because it allows those images to start to speak to us, and it kind of starts to loosen up these concepts that we can create around Buddhism, or that we might have read about in Buddhism. And this image, one could see it as a mirror. It's one way it's described. So that's the way I started off last week, was kind of suggesting that it was a mirror and that you might want to look at it in that way. And I also suggested that I know on the images, when you see them in books or on screen, even here in the room, what we're looking at is a two-dimensional image. But I suggested that really we want to see it more as a sphere, a circle. And I used this analogy of an orange, some of you may remember. So trying to kind of get this sense of it's actually a three-dimensional shape rather than a flat section. So this image really, as you can see it, as a sort of cut through, a cut across of an orange. And it's trying to make that shift in perspective around this image, which I think is really kind of a very important part of engaging with it. And last week, I asked the question, what sits at the center of the wheel within this, what I'm describing as a defensive circle of the snake, the pig, and the cockerel. So these three forces at play, which is said to drive the wheel, gives the energy to the wheel. But what I was suggesting was that there's something within that defensive circle, and that seemed to lead to some quite interesting discussions last week in our groups. And the other thing that I mentioned last week is, as you can see, what I find really interesting about these images is that the wheel is depicted as being up and in some way separate from the world, from the natural world. So it's really pointing to what creates that sense of self and other, what creates this distance between me and you, self and world. So this week, I'm going to be looking at the second ring of the wheel, of the hub. So I'm aware, those of you online, I've created a little PowerPoint for you. So if you would like to share that. So if you can go to the image of the ring, that would be great. So just for those of us here in the space, so what I'm going to be focusing on this week is this this section of the image, and I think why I'm interested in this as an image and as a question. I mean, I'm hoping most of the way I'm trying to teach is to pose questions rather than tell you what this means, because actually that process of questioning, I think, is as possible, is as useful as being told exactly what this equals that, which with an image is not really possible to do. But for me, this second hub, it asks the question, what can I place my faith in? So as we know, in this world of deceit, of doublespeak and unpredictability, there's always that question, what can we really lean into to support us so that we can maintain our faith and our curiosity about simply being? So I guess behind that, there's this question of, is it reasonable to rely on the central act of Buddhism, which is to wake up into experience, and depend on that act of inquiry into what is this? What are we actually experiencing here and now? To wake up into that inquiry as the means to bring meaning and ultimately liberation into this precious life. But traditionally, this second ring, it really opens up the conversation into one of the central ideas, concepts of Buddhism, which is karma. So we're looking at karma, and it's in relationship to another concept, which is that dependent origination. So dependent origination, this idea that all things arise and pass independent on conditions. So they're quite big, chunky concepts, and I'm trying to suggest that they're all here in this second ring of the image. So I'm suggesting or inviting you into this image, and what we can see immediately is that this image tends to be representing very much the workings of karma in a very polarized or simplified way. It's either we see either ascent or descent. And for myself, I think this is not very realistic. I know it's just a snapshot in time, but for me, again, I just want to try to sort of unpack it a bit to create a three-dimensional image for this section of the hub. So, Triratna, if you could go on to the ball of string image, please. So this, I'm suggesting this is a three-dimensional image. And what I'd like to be able to place here is, look at that, props, a ball of string. So what we have in this ball of string, I know it's rather tidy and neat, but what is really fascinating about string is that it's actually these very small interwoven threads which build up into a single line of string. But actually this string, if we kind of looked at it fully and deeply enough, all we would find is very minute threads that have been woven together, kind of bound together. And it's these minute threads that create the string, which then collect up into a ball that encircles the cock, the pig, and the snake. So the suggestion from the image is that we are either ascending or descending in this snapshot of time. But over the course of a day or a year or a lifetime, most of us are weaving up and down, round and round, creating this whole ball of tangled energy and views. And it's these tangled threads that build our experience of life. It's this ball of string, this second ring, is evoking the workings of karma. So that's what we're going to look at in a bit more detail tonight. So before I kind of go into that conceptual aspect of the teaching around karma, I'm just going to have to say a couple of things about this image of the string. So firstly, just want to say that me and you, we might imagine ourselves as a fixed entity. But actually, the me or you playing out in this image of the ball of string is just like the string, a whole stream of different selves coming to the fore, receding, dominating, seducing our life stream, shouting for attention, distorting it or hiding it. And it's this flow of selves, these coalescing and dispersing energies, that we are weaving into this fantasy of a single self, a single strand of string. And this sense of constructing this string is, of course, it's helpful, partly helpful, but also it is creating this binding delusion of separate selfhood. So we don't need really to look very deeply into this mirror to recognize that we are ongoingly creating this illusion of separate selfhood, that it helps us get through the day, but it's not necessarily very aligned to how things really are. So this is the first observation I thought was kind of worth putting into the mix. That is, you are just a collection of selves competing for control of your life energy. So the second observation is that we could helpfully start exploring the notion of karma by what we're describing and engaging with is symptoms or appearances arising and passing. So our present experience is flowering out of our own past. And our present experience is the way we're responding to these appearances, flowering here and now, are defining our future. So these are symptoms manifesting, coalescing into form. And there's nothing fixed or unchanging here in us, in this room, in this world. And this whole spinning wheel of the wheel of life, it only exists because it's held in these terrifying jaws of impermanence. So we have here this amazing creature, which is described as impermanence, clasping the wheel. And This wheel is these terrifying jaws of impermanence are absolutely vital for our life. There'll be no transformation or change possible without this apparent monster grasping the whole wheel. We'd simply freeze in time and space. So the more we turn towards this image of impermanence, the more that we can recognize it beginning to change from a monster into a guardian angel. So this crucial mark of conditioned existence, it's an angel because it is creating openings, it's creating endings. It allows us to let go. It allows us to meet death. It allows us to meet new life with clarity and patience. So we perceive this grip, which is formed through fear, by the desire for control. But the more we can see this demon more as a guardian angel, we may notice that it carries it forward in its being, the power and the energy of our longings. This guardian angel carries our passion that guides us forward into the world, into life, and tears us away from any fantasy of permanence, of stability and fixedness. So this is because the wheel of life is utterly fluid. We are living in an ocean of appearances, rising and passing. And there's always this choice present to grip onto that which we imagine we know or release into our unfolding potential. So this is impermanence. So, having pointed to this idea of the image of the ball of string, the guardian angel, I'm now going to try and say something about karma. So the simplest translation of karma is willed action. And it's connected to another term, which is karma vipaka, which means the ripening of the fruits of our action. And the context for understanding karma is this teaching that I referred to earlier on of conditionality, praticca samuppada. So, in a nutshell, it said, when this exists, that comes to be. The arising of this, that arises. When that does not exist, that does not come to be. And with the cessation of this, that ceases. So, if we can get hold of that, it would be very useful. Particularly if we can weave it into these ideas around karma. So this means that we can see our engagement with life as both experiencing the fruits of previously created conditions that we've established for ourselves, i.e. we are experiencing karma vipaka. Or we can look at our life as working with karma, consciously creating future conditions by making conscious, creative choices regarding our current action. So this is working here and now with establishing karma, positive karma. So this wheel of life is both an image of experiencing the fruits of previous actions, as well as clues as how to engage with life in a way that is fruitful, meaningful, and reduces, ultimately brings suffering to an end. This is the goal of this practice, to liberate all life from suffering. So I'm now going to try to add another concept in, just to hopefully make a bit more sense of karma and conditionality. And to do that, I'm going to, in 5 minutes or so, give you a run through of the 8 vijnanas. So there you are. There's a little map for you to hopefully help us on our way. So if you could, Triratna, put that up on the screen, that would be very helpful. I'm hoping those two of you behind the desk there actually can see that video. You've got it on your screen? Yes. Sure. Okay, I'm going to share because I need one for myself. Okay, so where to go? So the reason I'm trying to give you a whistle-stop tour of this map of consciousness is that I think personally it gives a very good, it really points to what I find is a very clear way of describing the workings of karma. So the first thing to establish is that there is this field of appearances. So all of us here, we have these sense organs, and because we have these sense organs, because we're in this human body, we all have, we're all receiving through these different aspects of eye consciousness, ear consciousness, etc. We are receiving sense impressions. So I'm assuming nobody's going to argue with that aspect of this diagram. So that's in the top section. It's called the field of appearances. So in this field of appearances, there's simply sensations arising and passing. And those arisings and passings, we are, without needing to do anything about it, we are experiencing and naming them, describing them as either painful, pleasant, or a neutral experience. So we have no, there's no separation between the sensation arising, and we immediately recognize it as painful or pleasurable. Now, this takes us to the innermost hub here, in that usually when we have a pleasurable sensation, we want it to keep going. And when we have a painful sensation, we want it to stop, and we resist it. So that sets up the basic mechanics of this spinning, driving forces at the heart of the wheel. It's our responses to appearances that start to coalesce into a particular habitual responses. And these habitual responses, as you can see here, we create in what's called the Klistoman's Vijnana, or the deluded mind consciousness, we create this sense of separate selfhood. So our separate selfhood is created as we identify with particular parts of our experience, and we identify with particular ways of responding to our experience. So these feeling responses start to condense down into habit. We respond with body, speech, and mind in habitual ways. And these responses, these habitual responses, in turn start to recreate the very conditions that supported the arising of these sensations in the first place, or our interpretation, what we're doing with the experience. So habit tends to reinforce, unless we're aware of it, we start to build these deeper and deeper ruts of conditioned response. This is who I am, so this is how I react or respond to this experience. I'm not a joyous person. So when I'm sitting in meditation, I can't experience joy. So joy arises, and because it doesn't fit in that habit, then I kind of push it away, I resist it. I'm not an angry person. So when we get this energy coming up in us that we don't quite know what to do with, we suppress it, banish it, we kind of keep it out of our system, we keep it out of consciousness. So we lose that potential life force that can really help us engage to set boundaries or to really break through into a new level of communication and engagement with each other. So these habits gradually create these furrows in our being, these ruts. And these ruts become a sense of me and mine. So this is what we describe as the deluded mind consciousness, where we create this sense of self out of simply a collection of habits. So if we go back to the ball of string scenario, that whole ball of string, which is a kind of ongoing series of habits, creating this line, this thread of string, because we're perceiving it as something real, something actually existing, we then create this whole web, this whole binding fabric around our core that is keeping us out from our more spontaneous, immediate response. So what's any of this got to do with karma? So what is really fantastic about this model is that in the deeper levels of this deluded mind consciousness, there's another whole layer of mind, which is described as the Alaya Vijnana. The Alaya Vijnana, the translation of that term is the storehouse consciousness. So what that refers to is that every willed action, it's suggested, creates a seed that is deposited in the deeper levels of our mind. So positive habits, positive responses based on love, generosity, kindness, those forces, those create particular seeds, which in this image are referred to as the white seeds. And those seeds that are more associated with more negative emotions, hatred, resistance, pride, these are things that create this sort of darkening and tightening of our being. So these are really representing these two qualities of seeds that we create in our life through our actions. And these seeds are being dropped into consciousness. So this is actually, I find it a really useful way of looking at karma, to see it as the depositing and the fruiting of seeds. So the work of becoming human is firstly to begin to recognize our own patterning, and then recognize the extent that we are reenacting these patterns. And can we begin to create sufficient space around those patterns to bring choice into our experience, to see whether can we find enough space to make a choice to between something which we can find a helpful response to these appearances, to these fruiting appearances. So just to say, we can't control what is arising here and now in our experience. That is all gone. It's already happened in the past somewhere. We have created the conditions for here and now. So all we can do is work with this which is already arisen, to work with this. So we can't control this here and now. We can only control our responses, our relationship to those experiences. So this is the Buddha speaking. As if monks, one does not, or monks, let's just say, if you fellow human beings, if one does not intend and one does not plan, but one still has a tendency towards something, this becomes a basis for the maintenance of consciousness. And when there's a basis, there is a support for the establishing of consciousness. And when consciousness is established and has come to growth, there is inclination. And when there is inclination, there is coming and going. And when there's coming and going, there is passing away and being reborn. Such is the origin of this whole mass of suffering. So the Alya Vijnana, this storehouse consciousness of this level of our psyche, of our being, is this establishing this kind of collection of tendencies. So this is these tendencies are the very things that we create a sense of stable identity out of. We imagine that this storehouse consciousness is somehow us, is me. This flowing with all these seeds is like a strong current, profound and subtle to understand. So this is the image of this level of consciousness. Just see. Are we here? Are we with this as a view, an idea? Hope so. Yeah. So I think what's really fascinating about this level of consciousness, as you can see, it not only refers to these kind of karmic fruits that we are placing in these deeper levels of consciousness, but these deeper levels of consciousness are also, this is where the archetypal realm is arising out of. So I'm not going to say anything more about that. I'm just going to leave that as a kind of observation, because we haven't really got time to go there. But just to just quickly point out, I guess, that we have endless Buddhist imagery around the place. We have a wheel of life. And these things are referring to kind of archetypal patternings of being, which we can engage with, which we can really draw on to affect our sense of identity, our sense of being. So although we are working in this deluded state to access these deeper levels of our being in order to relieve ourselves from the negative aspects of karma, we also can go in that same direction to access really positive forces, positive archetypal energies, which we can draw into our life. And that archetypal realm, we look at the image, we see that through in direct connection, continuing to flow in that direction, we pass out into, or we open out into, we release into what's called the Dharmakaya, this full, open, spacious awareness. So at the back, in the depths of being, is simply this open space or potentiality of awareness itself. And if I could make this into a three-dimensional object, you can see I put some arrows on this diagram. You see that if you carry on deepening into the Alya, all that you do is come back into the field of appearances. The field of appearances is opening, these sensations are blooming, blossoming out of this open field of awareness. So there's a whole cycle there which we can engage with fruitfully. to recognize that actually everything arising and passing through our experience is deeply connected to this deeper level of archetypal significance, poetic meaning. Every experience has multiple layers of meaning and significance if we can simply open fully to it. Okay, so there's a bit of theory. I thought it's probably time to try to talk about an actual experience as a means to kind of ground these fancy ideas into something kind of a bit more that we can maybe get hold of. So I thought what I'd talk about was something that happened to me when I was probably 6 years old, I think. So I was lying in bed. So when I had in my family, I had 3 sisters and myself, and we lived in the middle of nowhere in a quite a ruinous house, and we had the house was in quite poor state of repair, but we had this big double bed that all the kids slept in, which was like a haven, a paradise. At night, we'd all jump into bed and try to get into the middle so we weren't on the outside, which was always a bit colder. And we would all lie the foot the same way, in the same direction, and we scratch each other's backs. Go, oh, and turn over and scratch each other back. But of course, if you're on the outside, you only got it every other occasion. Anyway, that's by the by. Anyway, one morning, actually, I think it was, I woke up, and I turned to one of my sisters, and I kissed her on the mouth and said, "I love you." And that, in my memory, that night, I was put in a bed on my own in another room of the house. And I could hear through the wall of the bedroom my sisters having a lovely time in the bed next door, and I was there on my own, hearing that fun, excitement, and I was on my own, and I knew it was because of that kiss. So that little seed was dropped into my consciousness. And out of that, my whole relationship to intimacy, to sexuality, to an engagement with women was deeply affected. I knew that to kiss was dangerous. I knew that if I revealed my true feelings, I would be banished. I knew that if I revealed myself as, I didn't even know what it was at the time, I knew there was something new had entered my experience in that moment. If I revealed that to anybody, it was dangerous. So that was the seed that then over time just built deeper and deeper ruts in my being. So as I say, it built into a lot of anxiety, a lot of fear around expressing myself, fear of just really being in close, well, partly just showing my heart. Sorry, Narabira, shouldn't mention the term heart. Sorry, that was a bit on the side, a private. So what does that mean? Showing love, showing kind of care for others was a dangerous act. So this is something that I had to and have to work with. I have to risk to try to release from those karmic fruits, from that deep layer within the Arya Vijnana. I have to work to notice that anxiety and fear coming up in me. Notice any sense, particularly around any sense of erotic connection, which is a very misunderstood term, but simply to say erotic in the sense of simple pleasure in another, but also the pleasure of being known and seen by another is part of the erotic experience. And the last aspect of the erotic is this element of engaging with a longing for something which is always beyond us, always greater than us. That is part of the erotic experience. So to engage with those, with the erotic in one's life is crucial, and for me, my experience is it's very dangerous. But that is what I'm working with. That is the kind of the seed, the deep seeds that is in me. And I imagine that all of us will have these primary experiences that create seeds that we are working with the whole of our life. And what we're trying to do by engaging with the wheel is firstly recognize, start to see the power of these forces, the power of the Arya Vijnana, the power of these deep seeds laying within our being, watching as they start to bear fruit, start to blossom, build in experience, and watching how they blossom into appearances. So the work is to see through this acting out of these seeds that have bound us for endless, well, our life, maybe beyond our life. To look at these seeds, to see them starting to fruit, and trying to reclaim our fidelity to that which those seeds were kind of pointing towards. So they're pointing towards very strong, well, I said last week, I thought at the heart of the wheel of life is love. So really, I think what these seeds are pointing towards is actually an attempt to manifest love, manifest longings, and somehow, because of the circumstances that have created around us, we get caught into these unhelpful storylines and narratives that bind us, that keep us out of that clear, open space of love, open space of awareness. So that's quite a lot. I don't know what time it's. Okay, I'm just going to quickly end with a reading from Padmasambhava. Reading, because I think it's helpful just to, it's really pointing to this deeper levels of this image. That actually, if we keep going deeper and deeper into ourselves, we simply open out into awareness itself, open out into a new relationship to appearances and what's sometimes described as presence. So this is from Padmasambhava. As for this sparkling awareness, which is called mind, even though one says that it exists, it does not actually exist. On the other hand, as a source, it is the origin of the diversity of all the bliss of enlightenment and all the sorrows of samsara. So some call it the nature of mind, or mind itself. Some call it prajna paramita, or the perfection of wisdom. And some call it by the name Tathagatagarbha, or the embryo of Buddhahood. Some call it by the name Dharmadhatu, or the dimension of reality. And some name it Alya, the basis of everything. and some simply call it by the name ordinary awareness. Now, when you are introduced to your own intrinsic awareness, the method for entering into this space involves three considerations. Thoughts in the past are clear and empty. Leave no traces behind. Thoughts in the future are fresh and unconditioned by anything. And in the present moment, when your mind remains in its own condition without constructing anything, awareness at that moment in itself is quite ordinary. But when you look into yourself in this way nakedly, without discursive thoughts, since there is only this pure observing, there will be found a lucid clarity without anyone being there who is the observer. Only a naked, manifest awareness is present. And this awareness is empty, immaculately pure, not created by anything whatsoever. Authentic, unadulterated, without any duality of clarity or emptiness. Not permanent, not created by anything, but not a mere nothingness or something annihilated, because it's lucid and present. This inherent self-awareness, this alaya, does not derive from anything outside itself. This is the real introduction to the actual condition of things. So I'm going to end it there for this week. So this is what we're what we're trying to move towards, is to free ourselves from this level of our mind, this restrictive, this limiting aspect of being, these ruts of being, so that we can naturally begin to release and open out into that which is always present, which we know through being in contact simply with awareness, qualities of awareness. And the more we can open into the bare qualities of awareness, we become free of these restricting forces, these habitual forces. And we change our relationship to all appearances. So that's as far as I can go this week. Next week, I'm going to be looking at what happens, or how these different patternings of these seeds manifest into different perceptions of the world. So we're going to be looking at what's called the 6 realms. But for now, what we're going to do is we're going to have a cup of tea, vital part of any meeting, cup of tea, and for 20 minutes. That's okay?